Okay. It is Sunday, at least I think it is, and I've changed the color of my cups because it's spring, goddammit. And it's almost spring. Because we're at the beginning of April. April is a great month. It starts out with April Fool's Day, and eventually it gets to 420. And in between, there's us. And us, we are the rotation. Did I wait? Now, this is kind of a special show because we have an event coming up, and everybody has their role to play.
Rolling.
Yes.
What was it? I'm sorry.
I'm not going to tell you exactly what the event is yet, but let's just say that I plan on bringing some good Cuban rolls.
Roll. What was it? Roll.
I don't know. Gary wanted us to do this speaking
I forgot what it was.
You guys are such hacks.
Limp Biscuit. They keep rolling. Keep rolling.
All right.
I like
that.
Biscuit.
It is time for our annual Best Blunt in the Bay rolling contest, where we all figure out, do you have what it takes to roll your own?
Roll.
Yeah, there you go. You can quit that.
I
It didn't work the first time. Or the second time. And I want to throw in a couple of interesting facts about that thing we now call the pre-roll, which before had been called all sorts of names. And you have any good Spanish names for a joint other than you two?
Pitillo. Or wait, no, that's straw.
Well, some of you guys actually do use a straw or a rolled up dollar bill. And that reminds me. Now, you guys are you're young millennials. You don't understand.
We're elder millennials, actually, Gary. Get it right.
All right. Well, you guys understand the way we used to get our pre-rolls. Now, what we did, we started out with a dollar bill or a $5 bill because there's inflation. And this is how it works. You start out with the bill. You fold it in half. You roll it a bit so that it has a nice rolling feel to it. And you head over to Lafayette Park and you go to this guy who's sitting there next to his car and you say, "I'd like a pre-roll, please." And they would give it to you.
Oh.
No problem. No fuss. Don't have to get, sticky leaves all over yourself.
Like drug dealers would pot dealers, I guess would be a better word. Legacy dealers.
Legacy dealers, yes, because
would roll the joint up for you.
Yes, exactly. They used to roll on the hoods of their cars, over in Lafayette Park, New York, whatever, and you should just go in there. Now, here in this day and age, we don't do that anymore. Actually, we do go out and how much of your sales, Carlos, are pre-rolls?
Oh man, I don't know offhand. There's
if you were allowed to sell THCA.
I would say that in the St. Pete store, we probably don't get as many requests for pre-rolls as we do in Ybor because there's tourists here and stuff. But quite a bit. I don't know.
I mean, I've seen you've had people just rolling blunts all day long or rolling joints. It's like, what a great job to get paid $15 an hour just to roll up.
Yeah. That's what he has staff for, to sit there with the shaker box and just knock out a whole bunch of cones every day.
We estimate 30 to 50 pre-rolls a day in Ybor.
Wow.
And do you roll your own, or do you get them prepackaged?
We roll. We have the machine where we make 50 pre-rolls at a time.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we roll, but they get packed. It's like a paint mixer.
I remember before the machine, you had you would have staff just sitting there in the downtime, just rolling. Hey, there's nothing to do. You already cleaned up. Just roll up.
In 2011, when I worked at a dispensary in San Jose, the Nirvana Wellness Center. It was literally like the machine of the version of the dollar bill Gary was talking about, where you like roll it in the little, you know what
I
I'm
do
talking
have
about?
one of those
Yeah.
or two.
And that's what I would do. That was like my side work. I had to use that machine to make pre-rolls.
But the history of the pre-roll, we didn't start using pre-rolls or joints or whatever to smoke. We originally started out with clay pipes, wood pipes, that kind of situation, hash pipes. I got something going on in the background. I will be right back. Talk
Okay.
amongst yourselves.
I'll take it over for you, Gary. No worries. Gary's handling some issues there at the house. But look, this coming Saturday is again the best blunt in the Bay rolling competition. This is our third annual. So we've been doing this, for 3 years now. Coming out of the pandemic, it was one of our most successful events. People really liked getting out of the house and getting to do something fun. We raise a lot of money every single year around this event, and those proceeds go a very long way to supporting criminal justice reform efforts, especially here in the state of Florida. When you think about where we are in the state of Florida, I saw a very frightening statistic. Florida, when compared to all of our NATO partners, the Florida alone locks up more people than all of our NATO allies. And Florida has a bigger incarceration rate among people of color than exponentially than the rest of the United States. So
Yeah, land of the free, right?
the free state of Florida, as Ronnie D likes to call it, with his sausage fingers.
Yeah.
So when we think about what's there to do in Florida, because people are really excited about legalization and the prospect of what that means, but what gets lost in the wash in this country is really the need for some type of restorative justice, and those things aren't on the ballot. Getting people out of jail is not on the ballot. Uh, Fixing people's records so they can, be successful members of society is not on the ballot. Protecting your rights as a parent so you don't lose your kids or have it used against you in a custody hearing because you smoke weed is not on the ballot. The right to grow your own bud at home is not on the ballot. These are all things that are going to take uh, advocacy and education among the legislature, and we need money to do that. It costs money to drive up to Tallahassee to stay up there for a few days. It costs money to influence politicians. If you look at what happened this past legislative session and the one before it, where you saw the hemp businesses being pushed out of the market by the multi-state operators because the multi-state operators want to corner the market on intoxicating cannabis. They dropped several tens of thousands of dollars in victory funds for the Senate Republicans and for Ron DeSantis's book banning pacts and a number of other political, action committees. And so we, the people, only have our advocacy organizations like Suncoast NORML, like our friends at the Florida Cannabis Action Network, like our friends at Minorities for Medical Marijuana. There are not a lot. I mean, you can count on one hand how many orgs actually exist in this state that are looking out for the civil rights of cannabis consumers. They're not many. And NORML is the OG. We've been around since 1970 for over 50 years making this happen. And I mean, there is definitely moving forward room for NORML because we've always been a consumer advocacy organization. Even in post legalization, there is tons of other things to think about. In particular, when you make a legal industry that has been illicit for so long, there is the same downfalls that we have in capitalism altogether. People trying to make the most profit, and oftentimes quality gets sacrificed. One of the biggest things that drives me nuts is that you go to these legal dispensaries, you spend 70, $80 on an eighth, and you get these little tiny popcorn nuggets. And that just off. So even post legalization, there's a role for NORML to play in advocating for the best medicine possible for people, in advocating for quality products, in even advocating for the people who work there. Because what we're seeing is also a push for cannabis workers to unionize across this country, because many of these MSOs are not providing safe working environments. They're not providing fair wages, and all in all, we see worker exploitation happening across this nation when it comes to the cannabis industry. I saw a meme the other day. It was a Chad and Brad meme where they're like, "Oh yeah, what we're going to do is get a whole bunch of potheads to write our SOPs. Then we're going to fire them. Then we're going to hire. Then we're going to hire immigrants, and then we're not going to pay them, and then we're going to crush it. And then this is how we're going to make it in the cannabis industry."
Now,
And
capitalism is not a bad thing, right? I mean, what is the opposite of capitalism? But we're talking about economics here, not politics.
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that cannabis industry should be communism. What I am saying is that when you have capitalism and enterprise, especially with the way it's been set up, it's not a free market. Without a free market, without the ability of people to come in and out of the market, then you don't have capitalism. What you have is an oligarchy. You have
So,
a handful of select picked operators that get to run in this industry, and you don't have the ability to hold them accountable, because competition is what holds people accountable in that. But when there's no competition, then you get a loss of quality of product, and that's what we're seeing right now across the state. We need more people in this industry, because the shit that they're selling at some of these dispensaries, no bueno.
So my question is that, I mean, the amendment 3, would that be a step forward? And hear me out. It could possibly be a step backwards. The reason why I'm thinking, I mean, Gary comes on the show every week and talks about how our medical program is just so lacking, how it's not really patient oriented, how bud tenders don't really know much about how to recommend cannabis to patients in this state. And then we open up the market, right? Not necessarily to other businesses, but to more customers, to add demand to that market, right? Ultimately, the patients are going to end up suffering. It seems to me like quality would go down. Patients won't be able to get the medicine that they'd be able to that would give them relief. It seems to me that with the vertical integration that we deal with in this state, there's no way that these companies are going to end up meeting demand. You hear about these places that are getting ready for it, and they have all these great big growth facilities, but how are they going to meet demand? Eventually, sooner or later, I mean, the quality is already lacking. You know what I mean? How?
yeah, when you rush a product to market, you tend to lose quality.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons you rush to market is because you're low on inventory, and you've got to keep up. So more that happens, the more that negative influence occurs, and the less good product there is out in the market. And you've got to have enough employees to make it right. That is one thing we saw during the COVID in almost every industry. With a number of employees down, the quality goes down. And anybody who's ever gotten what they call a COVID appliance or a COVID TV or a COVID anything, they basically mean a product which only 4 out of 10 will work properly, as opposed to maybe 1 out of 10 being improper.
I mean, and Kano, you really did put things in perspective the other day when we were on the phone, and you know that I have some concerns about the new amendment initiative. You're like, this could be a step in the right direction. I mean, at least people won't get arrested for having less than 3 ounces.
Yeah.
That is a great thing. I don't want to see anybody, all 3 of us have been, I'm actually not sure if Gary has been arrested for marijuana, but
No,
I don't.
not for marijuana, no.
What happened?
Not for marijuana, no.
Well, at least me and Keno have been through the system for marijuana, and it's bullshit. It's just the government taking money from you.
I had to go to rehab, Carlos.
Yeah,
Rehab.
I hear you, buddy.
I was waiting for Bob Saget to stand up and be like, marijuana's not an addiction. I suck dick for coke, you know? And there's people in the rehab group that are like got real issues,
and
heroin addiction.
here's
Here
the
I
thing.
am. I'm addicted to marijuana because the judge says I am. You know?
And here's the thing. I hate to say it, but we're definitely not ready to legalize. We're definitely not ready to legalize. You know, you got DeSantis saying all this shit about how the state is good, all this false shit about how it's going to change the quality of life here. It's going to lower the quality of life. But that, like,
that's all he's got is fear.
You know, DeSantis to reasonable people. Let's just say to reasonable people, DeSantis definitely comes off as an unreasonable person most of the time. So forget about DeSantis now. I'm reading this book by Jeanette McCurdy. You know, I'm glad my mom died, and it's a great book. And she talks about all this great stuff about, you know, how she survived the abuse from child acting, and all this abuse happened to her. But then she's like, I had this boyfriend that was addicted to marijuana, and all he would do was sit around. And I went and I told him, you need to go to rehab. And, you know, and he went to rehab to make her happy and stuff like that. But I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, you're just telling us about how this guy has all these emotional problems. You're just telling us about how he had problems with psychosis, right? Maybe he's smoking a lot of marijuana because that's his medicine. Maybe you're denying this man his medicine and saying it's an addiction. You know, there are a lot of things in our society that does not, that people just don't understand pot. They just don't understand it, and they don't understand people that consume it. And maybe we're not ready for that. Maybe we need to take care of the patients before we legalize.
Now, for anybody who hasn't had a chance to see it yet, there's this 4-part TV series on, what is it, HBO or Max, called The Quiet on the Set. It's about the child actors in Nickelodeon in the 1990s and the aughts. And so if you grew up during that time, or you have kids who grew up during that time, and you really want to screw up their childhood now, feel free to let them watch that, and they will never want to ever remember having to watch any of the childhood Nickelodeon shows ever again, because it really will mess with your mind. But I can tell you that the people who did produce the shows have a definite bent against cannabis too. They mentioned the fact that Amanda Bynes, in her quote unquote downfall from fame, was found smoking marijuana. Like that was the
I remember that.
It's from there to dumpster diving at that point in time, right?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, tomorrow we're going to have a great episode, a special episode at 11, where we're going to take a deep dive into Amendment 3. But what I do want to address what Carlos said just a little bit ago, and that goes back to right now in Florida, we have the strictest cannabis prohibition policy among all 50 states, in that if you have 20 grams or more, which is not even an ounce, okay, that will run you felony charges in this state. And any amount of concentrate will run you felony charges in this state. What this amendment will do is essentially decriminalize for personal possession. There is no crime for having 3 ounces or less of cannabis flower, and there is no crime for having 5 grams or less of concentrate on you. Now, people ask, you know, there's still the open container laws in Florida. So, you know, if you have it in your car, readily accessible to you right there, you know, you have a joint in your ashtray, that's always been illegal. You have to treat it, you know, essentially with the same way you would treat an open bottle of alcohol. It has to be in your trunk. It has to be in the original dispensary packaging. You know, we still have these zero tolerance counties in Florida that are still going to be really tough on people when it comes to, you know, having medicine on them, when it comes to taking it home. You know, a lot of people also are held up on, well, how do you back something that was put forward by Trulieve? How do you back something that
literally like in unison with the chat?
Yeah. and
we're getting mixed messages even in the chat for this episode.
And for tomorrow's episode, we're going to hope to address that. We even have the counsel for Amendment 3 who argued it in front of the Florida Supreme Court coming on as a special guest. Now look, what we're doing here is allowing voters the opportunity to educate themselves and make this decision for yourself. Okay.
Yes.
We don't want to influence you in a way that, we're saying, hey, you should just go right out and support this. What we want you to do is understand the pros and cons and make your own damn mind up. Now, if you look at statistics, 88% of Americans do not believe that cannabis should be a crime. And when it comes to adult use of cannabis, those numbers are anywhere between 60 to 70%. So this amendment is going to pass based on two things: turnout and people being educated as to what it does. One of the interesting things that stuck with me through the whole thing was the arguments that people in the advocacy sector were making against the amendment were the same ones that the state of Florida tried to use to shoot it down.
Yeah.
In that it didn't include homegrown and it didn't do this and it did do that. But all in all, again, Florida has done everything it can over the last 20 years. And when I say Florida, I mean the ruling party in Florida, the Republican Party of Florida, to tamp down on our ability to have direct democracy, to pass constitutional amendments, to make lawmakers do the job that they don't want to do. And that's been on a lot of major issues, whether it's been protecting the environment, whether it's been drawing fair districts, whether it's been giving civil rights back to people who have served their time. And these things are things that the Florida Republican Party never wanted to do. So people went around and they collected signatures, they raised millions of dollars, and they made it happen via the ballot amendment process. Now, you have a multi-state operator like TrueLeaf. People look at them as, run by Dr. Evil. They look at them as an organization that does not have the best people's interests at heart. They're a multi-state operator that has had, employees die in other states. In other states, they've tried to unionize TrueLeaf workers, and TrueLeaf just decided to end all operations in the state of Massachusetts rather than deal with having a labor union among its work staff. These are the things that give you pause for this one company. But I want people to understand is that out of 618 dispensaries, TrueLeaf only has like 130. So they are betting, the house, if you will. They are putting it all on the line that this is going to pass, and that they'll get to essentially, I would say, corner the market for 2 to 3 years until these new operators come in and get up and running. That's what we can expect. The soonest you can expect over-the-counter retail sales, should Amendment 3 pass, would be the spring or summer of 2025, depending on if the Florida legislature implements Amendment 3 during the regular legislative session. Because what we saw with Amendment 2 is that they never got around to it. They ran out the clock. They had to have a special session, push things all the way back essentially to July. So it could be either May or July, before people see the opportunity to have adult use cannabis in the state of Florida. And again, it's only going to be the existing MMTCs that you are going to have access to sell it to you. Now, you're not going to have a doctor's recommendation, which means you don't have to go on, essentially a patient registry. You just walk in with a valid ID and, you can get adult use cannabis. This will also solve a lot of issues that we've seen with tourist reciprocity, in that, now tourists don't have to have a doctor's recommendation from the state of Florida or Florida residency and a Florida ID. They'll just be able to walk in, show that they're 21 and get access to it. So, all in all, what's this going to do for Florida? Well, the other thing you got to remember is currently medical marijuana patients don't get taxed on their medicine, because in the state of Florida, we don't tax medicine. But adult use cannabis is not a medicine. You can expect to get taxed. Right now I'm in the DC area. Maryland has adult use sales. So if I walk into a Maryland dispensary, I'm probably going to end up paying about $9 in taxes on an eighth. That's what you're looking at. And I mean, that's essentially the future that you're going to have. You're going to spend $9 to $15 in most of these adult use states In some states, it could be more. And those are the lessons that California has had to deal with, is taxing people back into the legacy market.
Yeah, the consumer is going to have to pay the ad valorem tax and the excise tax, which is put onto the producer, is going to pass along the savings to you, which means basically the price of your product is going to go way the heck up. In fact, it will probably, over the span of a year, cost a lot more than going to your doctor and getting a medical card and having to get research throughout the year as well.
So there is that incentive to still go to your doctor. I saw this in Colorado that I really found interesting. When you go to some of these dispensaries in Colorado, they'll have either upstairs, downstairs for medical patients, or they'll have a separate door. You got to love the medical patient line. One, they get access to more variety of products, and two, oftentimes there's a different cost associated with it, and they got a better line. So I always love that about the medical systems and in these states. What we don't want is what happened in the state of Washington, where they did away with their medical system altogether. They're still fighting for home grow in the state of Washington, and they were the state alongside Colorado that were legalized at first in this country. So, there's a lot to be said on, again, work that needs to be done. And this is why we're having our fundraiser this weekend coming up, is the Best Blunt in the Bay on April 13th, because we need money to go attack these issues, to address these issues. Whether Amendment 3 passes or not, you still can be fired from your job as a medical marijuana patient. And if we did pass Amendment 3, now you got to address impairment in the workplace. And I'll talk a little bit later when we cover the NORML news, but people in adult use states are still fired from their jobs for peeing hot. We got to address how we measure impairment in the workplace as a state, and we need to change those policies. I testified before the Maryland legislature earlier this year. I said to them, your analysis only works in a total prohibition society. But when you have a society where you have medical marijuana, you have adult use marijuana, the measure of impairment can't be pissing hot on a drug test, because that's not a measure of impairment. You can have cannabinoids in your system from a week, 2 weeks, several months, depending on how fat you are.
And just the fact that we actually have this as a medical product is something we've been using as part of defense for most of these bills that we've been working on, because we say how important it is for a person to be able to have access to their medicine so they can go back to work, so they can live fulfilled lives, so they can be better parents, etc. When it's just adult use, it's kind of hard to push that argument anymore, because it doesn't have to do with the medical issue. And yet you look at all the testimony that people have gone to and done over in Tallahassee, and so much of it is saying, I had seizures, I had Crohn's disease, I had PTSD, and this helped me. And then as far as adult use is concerned, they're not going to use those as viable arguments anymore. In fact, they're going to do everything they can to try to screw up the policy. And they already tried this year ahead of time. They actually had filed a bill this last year to put a cap on adult use before it even was a thing.
Yeah.
But then again, they don't think there's a problem with putting cap on the adult use, because medical folks need the higher doses and things of that sort. So let the recreational folks who are paying 4 times the price the medical people are to be able to buy as much as they want.
Well, Gary, this goes back to the philosophical debate at the crux of it all. Is all use of cannabis is medical. It's just a matter of, should you have to spend out of pocket several $100s a year for doctor's recommendations that are not covered by your insurance, or should you be able to just walk in over the counter and get cannabis, no different than you can over the counter access, non-steroid anti-inflammatories at the drugstore, and that's where we're at with this, is that the conservative politicians don't understand it. They even call it recreational use. No one's using it recreationally. They're using it medicinally, but they may use it without the direction of a doctor. No different than someone would pop a Tylenol on their leave without necessarily the direction of their physician to help with a knee pain or a headache.
Let me ask you guys this. This Amendment 3, is a lot, and sorry for the background noise, but it's a lot like it's a lot simpler than the medical marijuana Amendment 2 was.
Yeah.
So
Amir, what, 2 pages? 3 pages?
The medical marijuana system was butchered by our legislator. It was basically made impossible for, it could have been a system where it had horizontal integration and had a free market and all that stuff, but the legislator implemented it in this particular way.
Yes.
Our legislator is now worse. Could we trust them to implement this?
Well, that's the thing. We have an election coming up, and yeah, that's on the ballot right now. But so are people in the legislature who could actually go to Tallahassee and make certain this is implemented properly if it goes through. And if not, it'll help us implement Amendment 2 from 2016 properly for the first time by actually listening to some of the bills that we've written. So you have a choice coming up in November, and it starts out with first making certain, make sure you're registered, because you can't vote without being registered. And anybody who tells you, well, even the illegal aliens can vote, no, illegal aliens cannot vote. Number one, there's no such thing as illegal aliens. We have undocumented workers, we have undocumented immigrants, and the fact is, if you don't register to vote, they don't let you vote. In order to be registered to vote, you've got to be a citizen. So no, if you are not documented, if you are not a citizen, you can't vote. And stop saying you can, because it's bullshit.
Gary, thank you. No, I appreciate that. The scare tactics that we've seen from essentially, the death knells of the conservative movement on the right. I mean, they are pushing really hard and to scare people out of everything, to scare you to think that your kids are being indoctrinated into schools. They're trying to scare you to think that immigrants are coming for your jobs. They're trying to scare you into thinking that we're all going to be pushed into United Nations slave camps because the U.S. is going to lose their sovereignty somehow. This is literally the game plan that they have to run, because they don't have anything positive or progressive to run on. What has the Republican Party of Florida done in the last 20 years that the people haven't asked them or ordered them to do, right? Like when it comes to protecting the environment, we had to pass a constitutional ballot initiative. When it came to drawing fair districts, we've had to do that. When it came to medical marijuana, we've had to do that. Now we're at the stage with adult use marijuana. And again, it's having to be done by ballot initiative, because you're not seeing the existing power structures in Tallahassee do anything about addressing something that's positive for the people. All they do is scare you about what's going to happen to your kids. The kids are going to be all right. What's always pissed me off is, since we founded this chapter, every single year we have to do a press conference around Halloween to tell people no one is giving away marijuana gummies to kids. No one wants to take their hard-earned money and give out edibles to people. Maybe Carlos might run a BOGO special at the shop, but again, you need to be 21 and up to buy those products. So I just don't get it sometimes. But I want us to get back to, now that Carlos is back, what again this weekend is all about, and that's the best blunt in the Bay rolling competition. Now again, if you think that you can roll, if you think that you're a master roller, hell, maybe you're an amateur, but you might have some skills that you want to display. This is your opportunity to sign up. There's a QR code at the top of the screen. You can see it right there next to Gary. You can take out your cell phone. You can go ahead and put it up there with the camera app. Follow the link, or you can go right to our website, suncoastnormal.org. You can sign up and become part of the best blunt in the Bay rolling competition. There is some amazing entries available. You can either be a judge. Judges get to smoke it. We have limited judge tickets available. So once those are sold out, those are sold out. You can also, Carlos, are you broadcasting something on the bigger screen? We're all little right now.
Yeah, this is the ticket page.
Oh, okay. Got it. It was taking a second to display on mine. So, all right, awesome. Yeah, there's also, again, VIP tickets available for entry. Your VIP ticket, actually, VIP comes with a 1-year membership to Suncoast NORML. So, again, signing up for VIP tickets is a good way to renew your membership if you haven't paid your dues recently. And then, again, when it comes to what we're trying to do, we talked about it. We're still talking about it. We're trying to protect your civil rights, your ability to have employment as a cannabis user, your ability to not be harassed and pulled over as a cannabis user. One of the things that we're going to have to do is pass a policy in the state of Florida to prevent your car from being searched solely on the smell of cannabis. This is something they were able to do in Virginia, something they were able to do in Maryland. That's really where you're at, because as long as you can still have your car tossed, we've seen law enforcement in the state of Florida plant shit on people all the time. We see it all the time. We've seen it in Jackson County. We've seen it in Hillsborough County. We've seen it in multiple counties across the state. All right. So as long as police interactions can happen on the basis of cannabis, we're putting people's civil rights at risk. That's why our organizing exists, because beyond legalization, we have so many other things to address. When we talk about also, Florida as a cash crop, $15 billion coming into the state of Florida. That's a lot. Cannabis is already one of our top cash crops other than oranges in this state. And, we're not collecting any tax revenues from it. The adult use program in this state will generate new funds. My question is that this is why elections matter. Is the existing people in power going to collect those tax revenues from the adult use cannabis industry and actually put them to good use? Or are they just going to give their country club buddies more tax breaks? And we're going to be right back in the same position we were the next year with shitty roads, shitty schools, and shitty school lunches.
Yeah, case in point, the Seminole Pact. Did the money from the Seminole Pact go where it was supposed to towards education? Chances are no, any more than the money that was set aside from Amendment 1 many years ago towards the land conservation in southern Florida go towards that. It didn't.
Or the lottery in education, right? I mean, we have multi-million-dollar Powerballs, $1 billion in some cases. And what do we get? What kind of level of public education are we getting? And then they're taking the money out of the public school systems and using them for private school vouchers. And then you see these fly-by-night private schools, charter schools, not doing a damn thing to help improve student performance. It's sad. I never wanted to do cannabis policy full time. I always thought there were so many other more important issues in this world to address politically. But I got pulled into it, as Carlos said. When my dad was suffering from a terminal form of dementia, this was the only medicine that we were left with as an option, as a Hail Mary, to see what I could do to help him, to give him some type of relief. And I ended up getting arrested, charged with felony charges, having to go through the system. It is not fun. And that's why Carlos and I came together to put our heads together and think, like, we need to start a chapter NORML, because we saw that there was an absence in Central Florida, and really just speaking up statewide as well, when it comes to the rights of everyday people who utilize and consume cannabis. There are some moms out there that like to drink a glass of wine and have a cigarette at the end of the day. And there's some moms out there that like to twist up a joint. Neither one of those moms are bad moms,
Yeah, now, as far as the cash crop is concerned, in the history of Florida, for those people who are big into the history of Florida, our three biggest cash crops were in the 1560s and above, were oranges brought over from Spain, which were used for cattle feed, by the way. They weren't used for human consumption necessarily. And then because the cattle was a cash crop as well, although it was hard to transport meat at the time. And hemp. Hemp was a big cash crop in the state of Florida back before we were a nation. And in fact, as we became a nation, it became an even bigger cash crop. But the first cash crop that they really did expend internationally was tobacco. When tobacco was a very water-intensive planting thing, and a very labor-intensive thing. So that is why they brought human slaves into this country when they ran out of indentured servants to help pushing tobacco. So we had great cash crops with big downsides for a very, very long time. But one good thing about the tobacco was that it gave our proto-Americans something to roll with because they used tobacco leaves as the exterior for pre-rolls at the time. In fact, if you look at the Mexican-American War, at the time, they didn't have any papers to use and things of that sort. So when folks found a discarded cigar wrapper on the ground, They would empty out the tobacco, and they would put in ground cannabis, and they'd roll it up. Now it would look about that long, and it would be brown, and it would be pointed at both ends. And so they used to call them cucarachas.
Roaches.
Yeah, roaches. And that's where the name roach came from, as a matter of fact. And that wonderful song that I'm not going to let anybody sing at this point in time because it's racist. To sing La Cucaracha, La Cucaracha. Yes, se puede caminar.
There goes Gary telling Cubans what's racist again, Carlos. There he goes telling us our culture.
The Cubans are too much in your sugar.
Sing the song La Cucaracha, La Cucaracha.
Yeah, but can you sing the next line?
No, you know, it's interesting what you're saying, man, because like you think about it, we started this chapter when medical use was starting to become a thing here. Mm-hmm. And we were like, oh man, they're not representing all cannabis culture. We need to make sure that cannabis culture stays on board with the medical use to pass this medical initiative. And here we are saying that, you know, maybe we're not, you know, ready for legalization. Maybe medical, you know, needs to be pushed up a little bit more here in Florida. It's almost like we're going into legalization thinking that we need to represent medical more. It's almost the opposite of how we started. And it's just it's interesting. I personally don't think I don't know. The truth is that we're gonna have a meeting later. We're gonna all talk about this amendment. Unfortunately, I might not be able to join, but I'll talk to you guys about it later.
Yeah, I understand that.
And then we'll have the show tomorrow, and I guess everybody should make up their mind. And you know, we'll make up our mind as an organization. But it's interesting for an organization like ours to be hesitant even at the idea of legalization.
Well, you know, again, what we have to do is address what the situation is. All right. Couple things to keep into account. Number one, the amount of money it takes to get a ballot initiative going, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would have loved for us
to not have another chance for a long time.
I would have loved of us to put a ballot initiative up for home grow, to put a ballot initiative up, you know, to address some of these other issues that we're having in the state. But that process in itself is very limited because of the way the Supreme Court strikes things down for single issue and the amount of money it takes around $3 million just to try and get something on the ballot. You know, and then when we're looking I was just looking at someone's comment. It says it should be legal in all 52 states. And I'm like, what country has 52 states? Killing me, Smalls. Y'all are killing me. This is what I was saying about the education system, y'all. You know,
I've been talking about protectorates and territories, but then again, we have more than that because we have Micronesia.
No, I was actually talking to the NORML National Board. I said, hey, we need to move the Key West Legal Conference to the Virgin Islands because the Virgin Islands has adult use. You know, like who wants to go down to Key West with $800, you know, 1-bedroom hotels when you can go to Paradise in the Virgin Islands and also enjoy your bud. So, but no, I mean, again, when we talk about what this amendment does and what it doesn't do, what this amendment does is no longer makes it a crime to have 3 ounces or less in the state of Florida on you. What it does is no longer make it a crime to have a felony to have, you know, concentrates on you. But yes, there are possession limits, and there's possession limits in every state. You know, it's just some states are more liberal than others. This is what conservative legalization looks like. This is what legalization under a Republican regime looks like. This is the type of politics that is going to be played. And so that's why when we look at Congress and we take this to the federal level, you see there's the MORE Act and then there's the States Act, and they're very different. Both accomplish, you know, essentially some type of legalization, but one has, you know, the concept of letting people out of jail and expunging records and protecting people, you know, from the harms of the drug war on drugs. And another puts money into law enforcement and puts money into the existing criminal justice industrial complex apparatus. there's a lot to be said of the political differences at the federal level of how we're going to accomplish legalization. What I can tell you is at the federal level, NORML and many other advocacy organizations continue to say descheduling is the only proper way to address the harms that have been done by cannabis prohibition. If you reschedule it to Schedule 3, that is not going to address the issue of medical marijuana. It's not going to address the issues with making it illegal. What it will do is essentially give big pharma, right now we're talking about big cannabis, and we're talking about these multi-state operators. But at the federal level, scheduling Schedule 3 would also put these would put these MSOs in a essentially a heads up with people who make a lot more money than them, like Bayer and other places, GW Pharmaceuticals. I mean, once Big Pharma has the ability to get into the cannabis industry, things would change drastically. Because let me explain to people something, that under Schedule 3, you will not have smokable flower in this country. There's no way the FDA can replicate and make it scientific for dosing purposes for each and every joint to be exactly the way it needs to be, because that's what Schedule 3 testing would require, is exactness and scientific derived data. And you're not going to get that, because when you grow flower, they can be the same exact cultivar, and depending on environmental conditions, you can get bud that's purple and bud that's green. You can get bud with 20% THC. You can get bud with 25% THC. You can have, some buds that are more potent on the same plant, and then they're not as potent on the same plant. These are the things that cannot be replicated in laboratory conditions to produce a Schedule 3 medicine. So at the federal level, again, Schedule 3 is not going to make it happen. We continue to advocate for descheduling. When we look at the state level, again, what we have to look at is a few things. Are we going to be able to get an adult use amendment in the ballot in the future? Because, Gary, you saw this past legislative session, the one before that, as our political director. Is it true that the Republican Party of Florida wants to even increase the threshold to pass amendments up to 66%? Am I mistaken, or have they not floated that idea?
Yeah, it was supposed to go through this last session, but it managed to fail. But we are still at the fallback point of 60%, which is a pretty high watermark, even across the other states in the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we have one of the highest ones. Make it harder and harder for citizen initiatives to go through. And so that's why we were trying to get things done through the legislature, like when they did it in Illinois and in New York, because they were able to do it without having to do that. But right now, we have to deal with the way it is. And I can tell you that this is not the first recreational bill or adult use bill that has gone up this far. Well, actually, this first one's actually gotten to the ballot.
Yeah.
But there have been other ones that have put millions of dollars into efforts and tens of thousands of man hours pounding the streets, trying to get petitions signed, sometimes even knocking on doors and things of that sort to get it done, and never got to, the Emerald City, so to speak. And we tip our hat off to the folks who came before us. There were efforts in the 1990s, back in the earlier iterations of FCAN, or PUFM, that worked here in Florida to try to make this happen. And they've been working at it. Now, someone's asked me, isn't it crazy to say that if we finally got it on the ballot, that people who've been advocating for it for the last 30 years would be against it? If we're not against adult use per se, we're against the method that might have poison pills in it, so to speak, that might sour the milk, as it were, for the industry. And we're trying to make certain that the little guy has a chance to actually get into the industry. Because right now, the way it's written right now on this bill, only the MMTCs will be allowed to sell it. Mm-hmm. And right now, they are still keeping that number of licenses down to 22. They've done a damn good job for the last almost 10 years doing that, since they were allowed to start giving out licenses. And if you notice, it's been well over a year since the applications went out for the latest batch of licenses, and there's no scoring in sight.
So the applications. There is hope that it says other state licensed entities, and there is hope misguided, if you will. If not, I don't know. But there is hope that that could mean that the people that obtained hemp licenses here.
Well, that's one of the questions I'm going to be asking Mr. Bash tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, technically, we're not licensed to sell hemp. We're permitted to sell hemp. But there is, bringing up that argument again, there is hope that some legislator could fix that with some bill.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It could keep it. There is a small glimmer of hope, and quite honestly, in Florida, those small glimmers of hope may be distractions. But
you're on the nose though, brother. Like, you're bringing up a great point in that there is an opportunity here, if there's political will, to essentially allow these existing hemp businesses to be the small business owners that get into the industry. It doesn't have to be these multi-state operators. The amendment does allow for the legislature to designate not just the MMTCs, but other state licensed entities. The problem is that the existing MMTCs are the only ones in business right now. As Gary pointed out, there are 20 more licenses pending, but they're not, they're not moving on those. There's been this holdup for the past, what's it been, Gary? Essentially 5 years now of issuing new licenses because of the issues around the Black Farmers license, and they keep putting that back. I mean, we have a very engaging chat right now. Folks definitely feel very strongly in the advocacy sector about this. We're not here to push you to support the amendment. We're not here to condemn the amendment either. We're here to explain what it is and let you make that decision for yourself.
It's like the chat started with people that yes on 3, we did it, go NORML. and now
the chat's like frack you guys. You guys are the bad.
I like these people. I think they're bringing up good points. Like I am very hesitant to support this initiative. If you
want to see what 30 years of effort to make this happen looks like, take a look at a good picture of Keith Stroop, who's currently a senior counsel for NORML. He was there at the beginning, pretty much. Yeah. And he's there, and he's still there now. And you can see 50 years of stress trying to get this through on his face. It's just marked indelibly in all the efforts he's done over these years. And there's been so many attempts. There was actually a time when they were actually giving out cannabis to medical patients in the 1980s here in the state of Florida. There was only one patient left in the state of Florida that's available to. Elvie lives elsewhere. Irv is still here. But we have had a lot of missteps when it comes to making this happen. And I'm sure someone's going to come up with that statement again about, do you really want the perfect to get in the way of the of small progress? And no, but this is far from perfect. Yeah, there's Keith. That is the face of
good looking man. Good looking man.
At 80 years old, for Keith to still be our lawyer and still be representing NORML, and to be the founder, shout out to Keith for all the great work that he's done over the last 50 years. I mean, if you think about where we were 50 years ago with public opinion on cannabis to where we are now, NORML has accomplished a great deal of its mission to push public opinion sufficiently to where we can get to an area of legalization. But what we have to do moving forward is continue to course correct, to direct what's happening with this movement. And again, if this movement is drifting off course, it's going from a consumer oriented movement of pot smokers saying stop putting us in jail to rich folks saying, oh, let us sell this to the people because that's what the people want. I mean, that's where this disconnect is. It's not about consumers and their civil rights anymore. It's now about tax revenues and ways that lawmakers, especially conservative lawmakers, can generate revenues so they can hand out more tax breaks without raising taxes.
Yeah, and when they say they will allow it to be given to other state licensed entities, that means the state actually has to issue the license.
Mm-hmm.
But they are not mandated to issue licenses. They're just allowed to. Just like we're allowed to apply for them and give them $160,000 of a deposit that is non-refundable just for putting in an application and lose that money when they sit on their applications for the next 2 or 3 years.
I mean, what were there, Gary? There was like a dozen black farmer apps, and only 4 met the requirements to be looked at properly. Like they weren't deficient apps. I
Yes,
mean, that's wild.
and the people who won it, the guy actually died before the result came out, and so they yanked it away, saying it didn't belong to his descendants, which they're still working on right now, which they in the legislature, which is holding up so much.
Yeah.
And the people who actually were offered the license via a memorandum of agreement, they haven't gotten their license yet either. And yet, and this is what some people know and some people don't know, so now you're going to know. They've already been actively trying to sell that license on the market. But there's no market. There's not a lot of money right now in the M&A market for anybody to pick up a $55 million license. But it's out there for the taking. So you don't have to be a minority to buy it, but they had to be a minority to get it.
Yeah.
So is that really a step forward? Is that really social equity? Oh, hell no.
I mean, we're outraged at that, but the bigger outrage is that in the state of Alabama, Trulieve qualified for a minority license because Kim Rivers is a woman. But it's like minority. When you hear minority license, typically you think of people of color. Yeah.
What the fuck, man?
Well, I can't say that Kim Rivers is a singularity.
I mean, do you guys remember when medical marijuana was taken off and like they called it the green rush? Like there were so many people that were so excited to be part of this industry,
and then they realized, boom.
And I am wondering where those people are at. Can we rally these people to affect this amendment in such a way that we could like actually get something done here, or are we giving up? Are those people gone? Have they gone to another state to look for fortune there? Yeah. I'll tell you, I'm still here. My plan is to own a dispensary and to use this company, Chillum, to open up a facility that will use marijuana to get people off of opiates here in Florida. And I think that's fucking impossible now, man.
Yeah, they passed the law. They passed the law last session.
They passed the law last session that you can use cannabis in rehab.
Yep.
It's almost like they're giving up on the medical system. They're not doing anything with it. They're just letting these MSOs just take over and just do whatever the fuck they want. I am scared that this Amendment 3 is going to block me out from ever being able to be hands-on with cannabis. So I mean, what should I do? Should I stay here and advocate? I've been under that idea for 10 years now. You know what I mean? Like, can I handle another 10 years?
Well, let me ask you this, Carlos. Based on what they passed this legislative session, which is headed towards the governor's desk right now, should he sign that and it become law, you have till October 1st to essentially change your inventory up. Can you survive as a business with the changed inventory?
Yes, but my focus is going to be primarily on mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And we're very fortunate here at Chillum. We're really good at what we do. We're very focused on hemp and mushrooms. Every product in this store, except for maybe the t-shirts, have some sort of, something to do with hemp and mushrooms, right? We're not your average head shop. We're not. Head shops are the inventory is a little bit more diversified, right? I don't sell crack pipes. I don't sell kava. I don't sell kratom. I don't sell all the crap poppers and shit. You know what I mean?
No gas station heroin at
yeah, I don't sell any nitrous or anything like that. Right? Something's going on with my camera.
But you do sell cushy pies, and I love you for that.
I do sell cushy pies, but cushy pies are only here because they're some of the best cannabinoid pies you'll ever get in the state of Florida.
They're delicious, and that's a good point that you bring up. Cushy Pies is probably one of the best products and brands in Florida, made by a small business owner who's permitted under the hemp industry.
Yeah.
We are never going to get to see fucking Cushy Pies in a Trulieve or a Move or
Yeah.
or a parallel, and that's fucked up in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. I got to be
Well,
frank about it.
and this actually goes into your previous question. Chillum could be fine because I could fucking, end up becoming a normal head shop and selling all of that crap.
Mm-hmm.
Cushy
Normal
Pie,
Head Shop. What a great name
Cushy
for a
Pies,
business.
their whole business is manufacturing these hemp edibles,
Yeah,
right? They're not so liable to survive,
yeah, that's a good point.
unfortunately. So I mean they're really blocking a lot of people. They're blocking me out of the industry. They're blocking an entire business from even doing business. And we cling on to this hope that maybe other state licensed entities could be permitted hemp businesses, but maybe we're just better off going and doing what we love somewhere else.
That's a good point. I mean,
Yeah, you have to. And
here's the
there's
other
other
thing,
places you can. By the way, a heads up to the good folks over at High at Nine News who've been listening in. That means the West Coast is actually waking up now. You have to wait for last night's crack to kind of like ease out before they wake up. But they're a great bipartisan institution over there. Jason and Rico and those folks, they cover all the aspects, and we'd love to have them on the conversation tomorrow as well when it comes to looking at how we're doing it versus how they're doing it on the West Coast, and how much politics gets involved. Because to be honest with you, a regulated industry is not a free industry. And we really do need free market capitalism. But a regulated market is not a free market. It doesn't work by quote unquote the invisible hand, as Adam Smith used to call it, or supposedly said that anyway.
well, the issue is, Gary, is that cannabis remains Schedule 1 federally illegal. And so it's like, how do you create a market for an illicit substance? And that's essentially where you have this conflict, because you have essentially half the conservative lawmakers in Florida are prohibitionists, and the other half are like, oh, this is something we can make money on. And then the liberal lawmakers don't have any power to do anything about it. So
The liberal lawmakers or the liberal senators are all prohibitionists too.
because they're former crackheads.
Yeah.
And
Guys,
dumpster
I
divers.
love you guys, and this is a great conversation. We passed the hour mark, and I think the best blunt of the bay show turned into the preemptive
Amendment 3 show.
legalize it show. What do you
Let's
say
just-
we get into the news, Kano?
hey, I'm all about it. But Carlos, before you do, run the graphic for tomorrow's show so folks can see and then tune in. Again, tomorrow is going to be an amazing show. We're going to really take a deep dive into Amendment 3 for a special episode, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We have John Bash coming on, who is the counsel who argued Amendment 3 before the Florida Supreme Court. And tomorrow we're going to take a deep dive. We're going to rehash some of these things, but we're going to go really into what Amendment 3 means for the future of Florida and for cannabis.
I
But
wonder
now,
what I was gonna say.
yeah, but now it's time for the normal news. Well, at the top of the news hour, I just want to say, NORML is remembering a cannabis activist who we lost in the past week, John Sinclair. Carlos, if you want to run the graphic. NORML saddened to report the passing of longtime marijuana and counterculture activist John Sinclair at 82 years old. Sinclair was a lifelong poet, musician, and marijuana law reform advocate. In 1969, he received a 10-year sentence in the state of Michigan for providing 2 cannabis cigarettes to undercover law enforcement. His severe sentence led to one of the first ever national protests against marijuana prohibition, the Free John Sinclair rally, featuring John Lennon, Stevie Wonder, Bob Seger, and others, which was held on December 10th, 1971 in Ann Arbor. Shortly following the event, the Michigan Supreme Court ordered Sinclair's release on bond, which had been previously denied by the lower courts. And in March 9th of 1972, the court overturned his conviction. Again, Keith Strupp, who we talked about earlier, the founder of NORML, had been friends with John Sinclair since working together, on the college campuses and other forums around cannabis criminalization in the late 60s and early 70s. And John was actually invited to be a speaker at NORML's first ever national conference held in 1972. And of course, Keith and John actually got to hit the stage together one last time in 2019 at Ann Arbor's Hash Bash. And so, he is definitely one of the early heroes and martyrs of the cannabis legalization movement. And as Keith said, may he rest in radical peace. Ironically, John was the first person to purchase recreational adult use marijuana when it became legal in Michigan on December 1st, 2019. And so it's just nice to see how the universe arcs back towards justice, even though it is a big swing sometimes. Moving on to other news. So, a recent study came out that showed that occasional cannabis use during adolescence is not associated with cognitive decline. So, for all of you teenage stoners out there back in the day, understanding that longitudinal data published in the journal Psychopharmacology looked at research from Portugal, where Portuguese researchers assessed reward related brain activity, psychopathology, and cognitive functioning in a cohort of cannabis consumers with certain controls. The subjects in the study were all cannabis naive at the age of 14. And investigators then conducted follow-up investigations when they were 19 and 22. Researchers did not identify any significant cognitive differences at the age of 22 between occasional cannabis consumers and those who abstained.
Let me just say, I am so happy to hear you say that. I've always hated that idea. It's so contrary to the science behind cannabinoids that THC would stunt the development of brain growth. When you have something that regulates the body like cannabis does, it's just completely bullshit. And I'm so happy that the truth finally comes out eventually.
Exactly. And when the prohibitionists say that cannabis causes brain damage, they're going back to one single study from Tulane back in the 70s, which tested cannabis on monkeys, and then they looked to see if it caused brain damage. But that test was not scientific, because what they did was they essentially smoked out the monkeys with no oxygen supply. So they suffocated them to death with cannabis smoke. When you suffocate, there's always brain damage. It wasn't the cannabis that caused the brain damage. It was the suffocation that caused it. But yet, the Nixon administration and many others, prohibitionists since the 70s, have utilized that study to try and point to brain damage caused by cannabis. And it's just not scientifically accurate from what we're seeing from other studies. Now, touching on what we touched on a little bit earlier in the show, and this is something that's coming out. Data, according to a literature review published in the Journal of the Association of Official Analytical Chemists International, showed that researchers affiliated with the University of California at Davis affirmed there is no direct relationship between impairment in THC concentrations in a subject's bodily fluid. A finding that is consistent with opinions of numerous traffic safety groups, including the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the American Automobile Association. So both, NHTSA and AAA both show that current methods that focus on THC or metabolite concentrations in blood, saliva, urine, or exhaled breath can lead to false positive results for recent use due to persistence of THC well outside the typical 3 to 4 hour window of potential impairment following cannabis inhalation. Consequently, the study authors confirmed that per se traffic safety laws adopted in several states that criminalize drivers who just positive for THC in their blood is not supported by science, and then they are at risk of wrongly accusing motorists who are neither impaired nor have recently consumed cannabis. So again, we have to address these issues around what drug driving means, what impairment means in a legalization world. In a world of total prohibition, sure, you shouldn't have it in your system at all, but we don't live in that world anymore. We have a world where there are, essentially half the states in this country that are adult use and 38 that are medical. People are going to have THC in their blood. We cannot continue this reefer madness into the 21st century with legalization. We have to adopt, better policies. On that being said, a recent poll came out showing that voters strongly support letting states make their own marijuana laws. That being said, according to polling data compiled by FTP Insights on behalf of the Coalition for Cannabis Policy, Education, and Regulation, pollsters surveyed likely voters' attitudes in 3 states: Missouri, Ohio, and Wyoming. Respondents in all 3 states, including majority of Democrats and Republicans, strongly supported allowing states to set their own cannabis policies. The polling is straightforward. Midwestern voters want autonomy to develop policies that work best for them. Voters understand the importance of having the right to choose what cannabis policies work best for them without interference from the federal government. So again, these polling results show strong support for proposed federal legislation. HR 6673, which exempts legal cannabis states from the Federal Controlled Substances Act. This is a bill that's actually sponsored by Republican David Joyce from Ohio and currently has 9 co-sponsors. So there is federal legislation out there to essentially, allow states to continue to move forward with their own state level legalization. We'll see how that all shakes out. Now, looking at something positive that's being done, and this is why we talked about there's still a role for NORML even post legalization. Definitely in this state, because this is something that Amendment 3 doesn't do. In the state of Minnesota, state officials are poised to expunge over 60,000 marijuana convictions. These are low level marijuana convictions. The state's Bureau of Crime Apprehension officials show that they're in the process of expunging over 66,000 misdemeanor marijuana convictions, and they can begin as soon as next month. Legislation passed last year in Minnesota regulating adult use cannabis market, but also called for the automatic review and expungement of records for those previously convicted of certain marijuana related violations. What does this mean? That means that as we fight with our own legislature, should Amendment 3 pass, when they go to implement it, this is one of those things that we need them to address in implementation. Is that if True Leave and all these other places are going to get to sell weed, then anybody who's in jail for selling weed needs to be let go and records need to be expunged. And this is something that when we talk about restorative justice is vital and necessary moving forward. Uh, Other news in Delaware, lawmakers have advanced a medical cannabis expansion bill to the governor's desk. State lawmakers passed HB 285, which will direct physicians to issue medical cannabis recommendations to any patient who may benefit from it, regardless of whether or not they suffer from a state specific qualifying condition. And it also allows those age 65 or older to self certify for a registration card absent a doctor's recommendation. I love this bill. I think it is amazing to see a bill like this get passed. I'm glad that they're advancing it to Governor John Carney's desk. Shout out to folks in Delaware for doing something great. If you're 65, you're a senior. Hell, yeah, medical marijuana makes sense, and it's just being old. And then the fact that if your doctor says you can use it, the state, Gary, you talked about this numerous times. Our current state 10 symptoms or whatever with a catch-all at the end just doesn't work for folks. So kudos to the folks in Delaware and their state legislature for getting that right. Now, on the other hand of the coin, the Ass Hat of the Week award goes to the governor of Virginia, Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin, who vetoed legislation that sought to establish regulations overseeing the adult use marijuana market in Virginia. So in 2021, they enacted legislation legalizing the use, possession, and personal cultivation of marijuana by adults in Virginia. And that legislation called upon lawmakers to authorize licensed cannabis sales no later than January 1st, 2024. However, when Republicans gained control of the House and the governorship in 2022, they failed to advance the legislation to do so. Last November, Democrats regained control of the House and maintained control of the Senate in Virginia, clearing a path for cannabis retail sales legislation to go to the governor's desk, largely along party lines. And essentially, the governor vetoed it, even though 60% of Virginians support allowing retail sales of recreational adult use marijuana in the state of Virginia. The governor said that cannabis is bad for Virginia, alleging that states with legalized adult use markets have experienced massive increases in adolescent usage and systemic increases in violence. Neither of these claims are true. We've read the NORML used to you each and every week, showing that those are just false claims. At this point, the Republican governors across the state, whether they be in Virginia or Florida, are talking out of their ass when it comes to marijuana policy.
Which is a shitty way to talk, too, by the way.
So that being said, here we are. The Florida Supreme Court, ironically, one of the more conservative courts in the country, ruled against the DeSantis administration's attempts to strike down Amendment 3. It is going to be on the ballot, whether folks like it or not this November. The question is, are you going to vote yes or vote no? If it gets 60% of the vote, then the legislature has to implement it as law. Carlos brought up some great points about our small business owners still going to have the opportunity to get into this. There is a small window of hope there with the language of the amendment. what is the amendment going to do and what it's not going to do. Those are things that we're going to dive and tackle at length in tomorrow's episode at 11 a.m. live. So join us here. You can either tune in on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, also on YouTube.com/at Suncoast NORML, at our various social media outlets. And again, we'll have John Bash on tomorrow, who's the counsel for Amendment 3. But again, we do all of this because we want to see cannabis consumers no longer locked up, no longer discriminated against for being who they are and the medicine that they utilize, which is why we, again, need your support. We need you to become a member of Suncoast NORML so that way we can continue our strong advocacy efforts. We're only as strong as our membership as a 501c4. And again, we have some amazing opportunities for you to join. You don't just have to sign up for that membership, although having a membership gets you into the Best Blunt in the Bay rolling competition for free. You have free general admission for our members, or you can sign up for a VIP ticket, and it comes with a 1-year membership as well. All you got to do is take your phone if you want to sign up to be part of the Best Blunt in the Bay rolling competition, hold it up to the QR code on the screen. It'll take you right to our website, or you can go to suncoastnormal.org and check us out. Again, elections matter, folks. This election this November is going to matter. There are numerous things on the ballot, not just cannabis use. So I encourage you to educate yourself on the various amendments. Obviously, we're going to be putting out election education materials between now and Election Day. But I'm asking for each and every one of you to educate yourselves about what's going on. One big thing that's coming up, folks may not know, for those of you who are Democrats in the state of Florida, April 20th, that's right, Saturday, 4/20, is actually election day to elect your delegates to the Democratic National Convention. And so, if you want the Democratic Party to put legalization in the national platform, then you need to elect pro-legalization delegates. There might be one that might be running, in Tampa. So you have that opportunity. But then,
so guys, this is a no indica day, okay?
I have a.
Stay away from the indica that day.
I have something for that.
So if you get the opportunity, if you live in Tampa or St. Pete in Congressional District 14, and you want a pro-legalization delegate on the left, there's some 4 different voting locations between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. But again, if you're a Republican, these are also coming up too. I want all my Republican viewers out there to go and vote for pro-legalization delegates on the right and make sure that both parties have it in the platform. That would be a historic thing, that if both parties can agree, red and blue, that green is the way to go, then that would be a long way of healing the divide in this nation. And I think that's
an interesting point. Our guest tomorrow, John Bash, worked in the Trump administration as a special counsel to the president for a short time, and has also worked as a state attorney in the great state of Texas. So he's not a Democrat.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, oh yeah. For those naysayers out there that say we're a liberal heart bleeding show, no, we try to bring fair and balanced education to you all through all of this. And again, hey, look, if you want to support criminal justice reform with a good cause, sign up, be part of the Best Blunt in the Bay rolling competition, and then get out there on 4/20 before you start smoking and vote. But again, join us this coming weekend at Chillum from 7, until we wrap up 1714 East 7th Avenue. Again, suncoastnormal.org. Judge tickets are still available, but they will sell out fast, limited edition. So make sure that you sign up. There's going to be some amazing rounds. Again, if you can roll, we're going to have our judges judge you on a scale of 1 to 10 with their points. Round 1, you're going to roll up a hip wrap. Round 2, you're going to have standard papers. Round 3 is going to be a leaf. And then for the finale, we want to see how creative you can be. I want to see some. I still have not seen. I've seen it on the internet, but I've never seen it in person. I want someone to roll me an X-Wing or a TIE fighter, and I want to smoke that bad boy. So we'll see how that shakes out. But again, sign up. This is our 3rd annual, and we have the Broadleaf brothers from JC Newman Cigars actually coming to judge the competition. Or shout out to them for being there with us for this amazing event. It's always good to have Tampa's homegrown cigar industry actually showing some love to what we're doing with our cannabis.
So the heirs to the only functional cigar factory in the United States, JC Newman Cigar Factory, are going to be there judging blunts. And let's not forget, these brothers Broadleaf, they have some of the best blunts on the market. We're going to be using it for our leaf competition, but they literally spend all day worried about tobacco and how it wraps marijuana. Like these guys judge blunts all day long. It's their whole job. They look at each leaf. They look to make sure there's no holes. They make sure that the stems are all going in the right direction. And they're like, all right, that's a good one. We're going to use that for our Havana pearls, as they call it.
Fun fact: if you buy a pre-roll in Florida, it will never have a hemp roll, a hemp paper on it, because the state still deems hemp papers illegal.
So they're not using raw hemp in the pre-rolls in Florida. Shame on them.
Rice only.
They prefer wood pulp.
Well, Gary, Carlos, I will catch you all at our board meeting later today. But for all those watching at home, tune in tomorrow at 11 a.m. for a special episode on Amendment 3. And catch us each and every Sunday here in the rotation, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We love y'all. Peace.